Jodi, it's great to have you here at LeaderPass Studios. Excited about this new training program you're putting together and filming here with us at the studio, and then also delivering it on LeaderPass, the platform, to help parents and probably grandparents everywhere
Yeah.
deal with this. And I want to start by basically introducing you as a certified pediatric sleep consultant.
Yes.
What does that mean exactly? How would you define that?
So I'm certified to work with parents who have children from the ages of newborn to 6 years old
Okay.
and work with them with their sleep issues or sleep problems that they have, or just help them get started on the right foot with sleep foundation early on.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's big. Most new parents that I meet or know or that are in family or even us as we were having our first, our two kids, had our own issues and both were completely different.
Yes.
But I'm going to just launch right in and ask you, with your experience, what's the number one thing you see that parents are typically doing? I wouldn't say wrong because I know there's opinions and there's ideas and angles, but what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about, oh boy, here we go?
Yeah. Well, a big misconception is that whenever you have a child, when you're a new parent, oh, I'm going to give up sleep for the next 4 years, let's say.
Mm.
I'm just not going to sleep. This is the way it goes. It's a huge misconception because we have a saying within my industry that sleep is not a luxury, it's a biological necessity.
Mm.
And so we want children sleeping from an early age and a good foundation of sleep so that they can carry that on throughout their lives. So you don't have to go sleepless. You don't want to have those sleepless nights as a parent because it's unhealthy for your child. So we really try to work with parents to help them understand the health benefit of having good, solid sleep from the very beginning and not just throw their hands up in the air and say, well, I'm a new parent, so
I'm
I'm
gonna
just not
sleep.
going to sleep for the
Yeah.
next 4 years.
Yeah.
That's a huge misconception. I would say that the other thing too is that, children, it's a skill. Sleeping is a skill. And sometimes we have to teach our children that skill. They don't just come out knowing how to sleep perfectly.
Mm.
And there are a lot of factors that play into it, but it really is like a skill, like riding a bike, that we teach them, or walking, or, helping them with certain milestones. Same thing with sleep. And so it is a skill that we can teach them.
Is there so when you talk about learning a skill
Mhm.
or teaching some of the things that I know that you have become great at doing because you will literally be almost anywhere. I think we were talking yesterday about how, if you're at the airport or if you're at a
Mm.
park and you could be sitting there and it's within 2 seconds, if you see a baby or if you have a
Yeah.
conversation, it's pretty easy
Yeah.
to have that
Yeah.
conversation. But that skill, is there a perfect age to start, or is there a time where maybe it's too late to
So
do?
you can set up a foundation from the very beginning as a newborn baby. Obviously we're not going to sleep train a baby, but there are some really great tips and tricks that you can put into place to set up a good foundation from the beginning. I would say generally around 4 months is when we start working with parents to help sleep train or sleep shape their baby.
Sleep shape.
So sleep
Okay.
shape is another kind of way of saying it. So just introducing them to the right schedule, helping them practice letting the baby fall asleep a little bit on their own some, and putting them in the right sleep environment,
Mm.
because at 4 months they're going to be much more aware of their surroundings, and we want all that good sleep to come to their crib. So as far as too late, there really isn't. I mean, it's never too late to start with good sleep, right? So I have parents that come to me with 3-year-olds that have always slept in their bed and they can't get them out of their beds and we need help and nobody's sleeping. Great, let's work with a toddler. It's going to look very differently than when I work with a 6-month-old,
Okay.
but it's really never too late to start a good foundation for sleep.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. So when I think of a newborn, I think they're not going to sleep through the night. They're
Mhm.
going to be up all night. They're going to be, is that a misconception as well, or is that something that?
No, I mean, the newborn stage really is, they call it the fourth trimester, right? So it's really kind of that survival stage. And, we don't encourage any sort of like letting them cry or, do the contact sleeping. We encourage, breastfeeding on demand, feeding on demand. That's that fourth trimester where the baby's really just trying to get used to their environment.
Mhm.
But once they hit about 8 weeks old, it's really whenever they start to smile for the first time that, they're more aware of a connection. They make those connections with people.
Okay.
And that's really the time when you want to start bringing sleep into the crib primarily, or into the bassinet in the same space, if it's bassinet in the parents' room or crib in the nursery. Because they are more aware of their surroundings. So that 8-week mark is a pretty big indication that, hey, it's now time that we start working on, let's get them on the right schedule. Let's get them, sleeping in the right sleep environment, sleep space, not just napping in the car all the time.
Mhm.
Let's really bring that sleep back to the right conducive environment for them. So,
It's funny you said it's almost like a mindset because if you're expecting as a couple that has their first baby or
mhm.
whatever, or people that adopt or get, you're thinking, okay, I'm gonna lose sleep, and that's a mindset. You're saying you need to help them shift to say you don't. It doesn't have to be that way for
Yeah, and you really wanna shift it before they have the baby
yeah,
because, I think that, you have a lot of couples out there that kinda think that way, and we wanna say, "No, like, you can do this from the get-go.
right.
We're not gonna be, doing that sleep train, but we can really put some great things into place," and people hire me to help them figure out what that is in that newborn stage, even though they're not on a schedule at newborn. I mean, it's just
Mm,
kind of all over the place, but we
mhm.
can help with things like day-night confusion and how to get that right sleep environment that's going to help them, learn distinguish between day and night. There's lots of different kinds of tips that you can talk to parents about when they're even pregnant. So I really want everyone to know, like, no, this is not parenting does not have to equal no sleep.
Yeah,
We're not just going to give up our sleep because now we're parents.
yeah.
You want them to be the best parents they can be, and to be the best parents they can be, they need to be sleeping, and their children need to be sleeping
Right, right.
healthy.
I guess if you could get that mindset early enough, like you're saying, versus probably most people that you encounter or run into are knee deep in it. They may not have
Yes,
the
they already have the
the
struggle.
they've already got the struggle. What's the biggest mistake you see parents make with a toddler when they're trying to get them to sleep all night? What's the biggest mistake you see?
Well, not even with a toddler, but with children in general that are on a schedule, one of the biggest mistakes is the idea that, well, they're not sleeping through the night or they're waking up too early, so we need to keep them up later. If they're waking up at 5 a.m. and we want them to sleep until 6, we need to keep them up later so that
So
they'll
they
sleep
sleep
later.
longer.
It's
Okay.
actually completely counterintuitive. But Jamie, every single time I have worked with a family and I've said, you know what, you might be putting them to bed a little bit too late. Let's try 30 minutes earlier. They text me the next morning, "Oh my gosh, you're a genius." It
So
happens
putting them down
every time.
earlier,
Yes,
even if they're okay. Why?
because most of the children that I work with already have accrued a sleep debt, right? So parents reach out to me when there's a problem, they're not sleeping, their child's not sleeping, doesn't matter the age, there's a sleep debt. And the only way that you can correct a sleep debt is at bedtime. You're not gonna correct it with a nap, you're not gonna correct it with
Really?
multiple
Okay.
naps throughout the day. It is at bedtime, and the best sleep for children occurs at the beginning of the night. So before midnight.
Mm,
So
mhm.
you want to back that sleep up, that bedtime up, catch them at the right time, which is huge. You don't wanna miss their window, and get them to bed earlier, and then they get more rest at the beginning of the night, which translates into a later morning or not waking up so much in the night.
Interesting.
And I think a lot of people believe, "Oh, I gotta let my baby cry it out to fix their sleep problems." A big piece of the puzzle is the schedule. And
Really?
so many parents don't have
Okay.
their children on the right schedule.
Hmm.
And really that's where I come in and, I studied the science of sleep. And we know those times that really biologically are appropriate for different ages for sleep. We don't go by wake windows past 4 months old. That's a big, like,
What's a wake window?
so a
Like a
wake window, you see this a lot in the literature that you read. Wake windows is how long should my baby be awake before I put them down for their next sleep period. So it could
okay.
be a nap or bedtime. And we do wake windows for the first 4 months. But once you move past 4 months, we move into what's called bio times. So it's biologically appropriate times for sleep. And this has just been proven by science. We can talk about that another time. But, it really is these certain times that children do best. So you're going to watch your child, but you're going to look at the clock. Hey, this is the time. This is that time for this age. Let's start winding them down and getting them into the bed. So yeah, we move away from those wake windows into those bio times, and it's just such a sweet spot. I'm telling you, I see it so much. Like when they get it right, when they catch the right time, and they put them down at that right time, it's so easy.
That's
It
incredible.
doesn't have to be hard. Like it doesn't have to involve. I think a lot of people are afraid of this sort of thing because, oh, I have to let my baby cry and I can't listen to them cry. It's not fun. I get it. I totally understand that. But the schedule sometimes is the biggest piece of the puzzle. And if I fix the schedule, it all falls into place.
Wow, even more than the idea of letting them struggle to fall asleep or
100%.
or cry.
Yeah.
The
I just
schedule's
worked
a
with someone the other it was someone doing my hair. We started talking about sleep and she was telling me the issue and I said, "Well, what are the nap times? What time are you putting them to bed?" I said, "Try this." And then she texted me the next day and she said, "This is unbelievable. They didn't wake up at all in the night and cry
wow.
because we were getting that sleep at the right time for the right amount of time during the day, which help for a better night.
Do you typically start there then? If that's kind of the sweet spot idea, is that one of the first things you say, "Hey, let's begin there with the timing?"
Yeah, let's talk to me about your schedule. When I have someone call me, for just like a complimentary, touch base kind of phone call, it's the first question I ask.
Is the sleep schedule.
Sleep schedule. I mean, after I find out how old they are, but yeah, it's the sleep schedule. Like, what time are they napping? What time are they waking up? What time are they going to bed?
Is
And
the
it's usually all over the place.
Okay, so and is that typically just they're going by gut, or they're going by the
They're
energy of the
going
kid or
by
the
they're
child?
going by gut, they're going by all the literature that's out there. There's so much literature out there that is confusing. And, I experienced this myself whenever I had my first child. We had sleep issues with my first one before I was a sleep consultant. And I was going crazy and I read every book, I watched every video, I, tried to do everything under the sun to help him sleep. And it was so contradictory. I would pick up one book and it would say one thing, do this time, and then the next book, don't do that time. Complete contradiction. And so I think what tired parents need is for you to hand them a plan, and this is what will work if you do it. If you do these times, in particular with the schedule, this is what works, rather than go in here, trying this, trying this. Let's stick with one plan, this schedule, do it for a few days, and it's gonna all come together.
Is there a time that you would suggest if they're, like, all over the place, would you pick a time and just say, "Hey, just try 7 o'clock or try 8 o'clock"?
Well, it
Or is
really
it not
depends on
like
the age. It depends on the
Okay,
age, and it depends on, like, for instance, if you have a child that's on a 3 nap a day schedule, so typically that's gonna be, around 6 months, they're gonna be on a 3 nap schedule. So they're gonna take a really good first nap, a really good second nap. They're gonna take that third cat nap is what we call it, because that's a bridge until bedtime.
okay.
And that one can be on the go. You can do that one in the car if you need to. That's just a bridge to help them get to that bedtime hour. If they skip that, we move bedtime earlier. So
Mm,
you kind of have to see what the child does during the day in order to time those naps and bedtime around those bio times that I was talking about. A lot of parents too, they're busy. They have their schedules. They have
right.
multiple children. It's really hard. It is not easy. And what I always say is just do the best you can. Like if I have a client who has 3 kids and they're at sporting events and they have a baby, I mean, I can't ask them to hire a babysitter for the baby to get them down at the right time necessarily. So I say, look, do it the best you can, but earlier is better,
Yeah. Which is counterintuitive because you think
counterintuitive.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big deal. What about eating? Does eating timing or any of that make a difference or not really?
I don't deal much with feeding stuff. I usually defer to a child's pediatrician when it comes to any sort of nutrition or feeding.
Mhm.
There's old wives' tales like, oh, put rice in the milk in the formula, or feed them a lot during the day so that they're not up at night. I find those to be old wives' tales.
Mm.
Um, Really, people should talk with their pediatricians about feeding. But and a lot of times parents want to know, can I drop feedings in the middle of the night? Is it time? I say, talk to your pediatrician. If they say yes, let's do it. Because that's just another interruption in the night that a baby might just be used to that feeding, or a mom might be used to that feeding, and maybe they don't need it. So,
Right. Let's talk about toddlers waking up in the night. So if you're dealing with that scenario, let's say they've gone for the schedule or they're implementing the schedule, is there any do's and don'ts that you would suggest based on your experience for parents to, hey, this is not a good idea to do
with
this or
toddlers,
whatever?
yeah.
Yeah,
So, first of all, my biggest advice, I say this all the time, is leave a child in a crib as long as you can.
in a crib.
In a
Okay.
crib,
Okay.
because it really is your own that last method of sort of containment. When you get out of a crib, it's a whole new ball of wax, because you have to keep them in that room, so
Because they can get
they can
mobile.
get
They
out.
can, yeah.
So, as a for instance, I mean, I tell parents 4 years old, if they are not too big for their crib and they're not crawling out and it's not a safety issue and they're happy, leave them in the crib
To
as
four.
long as you
Wow.
can.
Okay.
Yes. A lot of parents skip to the bed because there's a new baby coming, right? So they think, oh, I need the crib so that I can put the baby in the crib. I say, go get a pack and blanket, go get a bassinet. The baby's gonna be in a bassinet probably by your bed for 6 months anyways. Don't rush to move out of the
Mm,
crib. You got a toddler that's dealing with the change of a new baby. Let's not go taking away their crib.
mm.
Um, Toddlers are a whole nother ball of wax, quite frankly, right? So if I'm working with a 7-month-old, it's completely different than a toddler. So do's and don'ts would be, keep them in the crib as long as possible. If you are in a bed, you want to childproof the room, and you want to treat it like a big crib.
The
Put
room
it
itself.
yeah, put
Yeah.
a gate up. If they want to have the door open, put a gate up. And don't think you're trapping them in there. All you've done is made the room a big crib, which is what they were in before.
Yeah.
But you have a little more control that way with your child, and it's safer, obviously. I would say that if you have 2 children who, I work with, we live right outside of Manhattan. I work with a lot of clients that are in Manhattan. They don't have a lot of space,
Mm.
and so 2 siblings might need to share a room, and, you might have both that are having trouble sleeping or maybe just one. I say, "Let's move the older one that's sleeping well out, and let's work on the little one and get them sleeping, and then move the older one back in." If
So you
both
separate them at
I
that point.
separate them, and if both are having a trouble, then we work on one first, and then we move to the other one.
So you don't try to necessarily fix both of them at the same
Correct.
time.
Yeah.
So do you pick the younger one or older one?
And
Doesn't
that's
matter?
that's with siblings that are different ages. With
Yeah.
twins, I will move a twin out of the room and
Will you
work
really?
on
Okay.
if a twin is
Interesting.
usually you have one twin that sleeps a little better than the other twin, we might move the twin that sleeps better out for a little while and work on the twin that's having trouble and then move them back in together.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, because I picture it being, well, they're gonna console each other,
Yeah.
which is not the
I
right.
mean, probably not. I mean,
Yeah.
with the twin situation, I don't always separate twins, because twins are different. They're the same age. It's different than having like a 15-month-old and a 4-year-old in the same
Right.
room, right? So
Right.
twins, we can leave them in the same room to sleep train them together. But if one is sleeping better than the other one, that's when I would move a twin
Because it
out.
will end up disturbing
Yeah,
the
because
yeah.
a lot of times twins too, like, they get used to each other crying because 'cause they've been in the womb together,
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a little different with twins versus, like, siblings that have more of an age gap.
So
And
they'll
the
get me
truth
more.
is,
Yeah.
when you're desperate for sleep, you're willing to do it. You're thinking, "Oh, well, maybe if I do this, it'll work. Maybe if I do this, it'll work." So I don't blame anyone for what they try to do to make it work because you're desperate,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But that's really where, someone like me comes in and helps them with that and lets them know, "Hey, let's try it this way. Let's do it this way, and this is what I've seen work better."
So one at a time,
Yeah.
if you've got to.
Yeah.
One at a time, even if they're twins.
Yeah.
Separate them potentially and do that.
Mhm.
And then crib, you keep them in the crib. I'm just recanting what we've talked about.
Mhm.
Or if they can't, if it's a safety issue, that's what we did. We had a crib, and then our second decided he was going to take a jump out. He was
Yep.
bigger. He was a bigger boy.
Yeah.
And then we put the gate at the door, left the door open.
Yep.
And so it was times where he would get up and just look down the
Yeah.
hallway at us, like, "Hey, you down there?"
How's it going?
But
And
yeah,
toddlers feel more connected with a gate. Some parents say, "Oh, can I just shut the door?" And you totally can, but a toddler might want to feel more connected to the house once they moved out of their crib and
Mhm.
into a bed. So that's why we say a gate. We definitely have issues with toddlers climbing gates, and that's a whole nother ball of wax.
Mhm.
But those are just those little things that you can, work on as you go.
Mhm. So, and I know we jumped straight into, because I had a couple of hot questions to
Yeah,
ask, because
you were ready.
yeah, I was ready. But let's talk about your certification. What motivated you to do this,
Mhm.
and then let's talk about what you do, because it's interesting. I didn't know it existed.
Yeah.
Had no idea.
I didn't either. So I started my career as an English teacher. I taught high school for 10 years. I loved it. And then I was ready to have a family. And it was kind of a dream of mine to be a stay-at-home mom. So I took time off to raise my first son. He was the most horrendous sleeper on the planet. I think I talked about that a little bit ago. It was grueling and caused a lot of issues, even for me and my husband. We weren't on the same page. We were fighting about it. We couldn't be consistent with anything. We were getting different information everywhere. So we didn't have a child for a very long time after that. And then we got a surprise baby in our 40s. And I thought, I can't go through that again. I can't go through that kind of torture again with no sleep. And someone told me, why don't you hire a sleep consultant? I had no idea they existed. That's about 6 years ago. And I hired one, and it changed my life.
Okay.
And so I was riding in the car one day, and I had an epiphany. And I thought, you know what? I want to do this because I knew that I had the empathy to help parents. I knew I had gone through it myself. I knew I was going to have the empathy for it. I knew I was going to connect with them on it. I wanted to help them. I just needed the education. So I enrolled in the Family Sleep Institute and went through their certification program and opened up my own business. And so what we do is you can call a sleep consultant if you're having issues. You can call on a sleep consultant, and really they not only just provide you with that plan, but they offer the support part. And to me,
support
that's
part,
such a
okay.
crucial part of the
Like support
story.
meaning like pick up the phone, text.
Yeah,
What
I
do you
mean,
do?
everyone's different. So you'll have consultants who you can, maybe they say in their plan, you can email them once in the morning, once at night. My passion is the support piece. So I really like for my clients to have the ability to text me during the day if they need it, or,
Mm.
the grandmother if she's watching the baby texts me, or the
Oh,
nanny.
wow.
Oh, yeah, I
Cool.
work with all of
So
them.
it's anybody in the family
Anybody in the
system there.
family.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm on group texts with every caretaker of that family.
Wow.
And so just offering that support. Hey, they can say, "Hey, Jody, he did this during nap. He woke up at this time. Great. Sounds awesome. Let's put him down at this next time." Even though that's in their plan, they like that one-on-one support.
Yeah.
Some parents are pros and they're like, "You know what? We just need the plan." So I'll write them a plan. And then
Mm.
I'll say, "Check in with me in a week and let's talk about how it's going." So I offer, most sleep consultants offer daily support or maybe just a check-in. Depends on really what the parent wants
Yeah.
and what
I
kind of
think
support.
that's so cool because I can imagine, a grandparent comes in, the parents have been working with the child, they've got them on a program, a routine,
Mm.
and then the grandparent comes in, they're like, "Oh, that's not how we did it," and come in and
Yeah,
undoes
it's
stuff, literally.
tricky. It's
So, but
tricky.
it's awesome because that's what I love about you creating this training program too,
Mm.
because the way you're doing this is in micro lessons
Yes.
by subject, and it allows that could literally be given to the grandparents or to the aunt who's watching or the
Or the
caretaker.
nanny.
Yeah.
And what's good about that is that, it's very difficult, I think, for a mother, the grandmother, to listen to the daughter who's now the new mother, right? She
Okay.
wants to say, "Hey, this is how we did it. We did it differently, and I'm not gonna do it that way." But when they listen to a lesson or get that micro lesson, it's coming from that third party. So it really makes more, it's kind of like opens up their mind a little more. And I
Absolutely.
find that on, those support calls, I'll get on the phone with the grandmother and I kind of have to sell it to her. But then she's like, "Okay, I'm on board."
Oh, really? Okay.
And I never want grandparents to, if we're doing something that might be a little more hands off with a child where we're letting them have some space to figure it out and they're a little upset in the beginning, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
very normal. I don't wanna make a grandparent have to deal with that necessarily, so we come up with other ways that they can do things at the grandparent's house versus the parent's
Okay.
house,
So
and you
you
can do
do.
that, yeah, because, I work with divorced parents all the time, right?
Mhm.
So, I can't, automatically assume that mom is gonna do the same thing that dad's doing or that dad's gonna be on board with the plan that I have for mom, vice versa.
Mhm.
So, we have to do things a little bit creatively there, but it works out.
What a great resource.
Yep.
And you having gone through it and me picturing this just is like you almost got to have a coach and you're gonna cheer them on, say,
It's
hang in there. This is the time
100%.
where you got to stick it out,
That's it. I always say that I'm the teacher because I developed the plan for them.
Mhm.
I'm the coach. I coach them along, and I'm the cheerleader because I'm jumping up and down with them when they have a good night. I
That's
mean,
awesome.
it makes me so happy to hear that the next day
Yeah.
because I know how much that means to them when they've not been sleeping.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really
That relief.
it's that reward part of what I do.
And if you do your job right, technically you're working yourself out of a job because if you do it
Yeah,
right, you're like,
exactly.
it worked.
It
Okay. See you
worked.
later.
Yeah.
But that's cool because
No,
that's,
it's
yeah.
awesome, and
Yeah.
I honestly, like, when I ask parents, "Well, how are they sleeping?" I see a parent of a young child, "How are they sleeping?" "Great." I'm like, "Awesome."
You know, that's a
'Cause I
win.
want the best for anybody,
Yeah.
and so I want them to be sleeping well.
What are your thoughts on co-sleeping? Just with parents, specifically,
Yeah,
obviously.
so every parent has a different philosophy, and so I'm not someone that's gonna come in and try to change their parenting philosophy. What I do is I follow the safe sleep practices that are given out by the American Pediatric Society, right? So American Academy of Pediatrics, I should say. So, co-sleeping right in the same bed, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, can be unsafe.
Mhm.
So when I have a person tell me that they are co-sleeping, it's trickier or sleep training a child when they are co-sleeping. And I
Mm.
usually point that out to a parent and I
That's a
say,
good
"Hey,
point.
while
Yeah.
you've hired me, let's work on getting them in the crib or getting them in the bassinet. You've already hired me to do this. Let's just knock it out and get it done." And that's usually what we do. But my thoughts on co-sleeping is, just to do it to be safe, honestly, to be safe. And
So it's a
we've
safety issue
it's a
more than
safety
anything.
issue. It
Okay.
really is. So I recommend putting a bassinet right by the bed. Have them sleep in your room as long as you want, but put that bassinet right by your bed
Mhm.
versus getting in the bed where there's pillows and blankets and,
Right.
you're exhausted and could all kinds of things can happen. So,
And so as they get older, what's your thoughts? Because, we ran into issues with like the dependency
mm,
of needing to be in bed with
mhm.
us with our first child.
Yep.
And that lasted
Mhm.
a long time till our second child came, which was 4 years.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? And is that does it always lead to that? Or if there's a timing where you're like, hey, get them out, get them in the crib.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not a problem, if it's not a safety issue and it's not a problem and everybody's getting great sleep, I'm not gonna say you have then there's no problem, right? If you have a baby coming and that baby's now gonna be in the room with you and that young child, it's probably best that you get that young child out so
Mhm,
that the baby's not waking them up at that
mhm,
point. You know what I'm saying? Because
mhm.
you're not gonna be sharing the room with everyone. So it's probably best to go ahead and get that child to their own room, and there's a lot of different strategies that can be put into place to do that, that will line up with all those different parenting philosophies. Not every parent has the same
Right.
philosophy when it comes to sleep.
But the routine is key. The
Routine
timing
is
is
key.
key.
So there are 5 keys in my opinion. 5 pillars of healthy sleep, let's call them. So number 1 is sleep environment. Crucial. You gotta get the right environment. Same thing for us, right? As adults, we
Mhm.
want the right environment to sleep in, and that usually means cool, cave-like, dark. Children don't need a nightlight when they're little bitty, you
Mm.
know, they're not having those fears. It's not until a little bit later they might express fear, so you really don't need a nightlight. If you do use a nightlight, it should be not blue or white, it should be orange or red.
Okay.
Sound machine placed about 7 feet away from the
So
crib,
they're okay in your mind.
100%. So the sleep environment is crucial. The second one is sleep consolidation. We want children that are sleeping throughout the night, right?
Consolidation, okay.
Consolidation when it's appropriate. I mean, they're not gonna be doing that when they first, are born, but
Mm,
when they are able to do that, we want them sleeping consolidated sleep.
mhm.
Bedtime routine is key. You need a solid bedtime routine, and you really need it from day 1. I encourage parents to have a solid bedtime routine from day 1.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And so because the bedtime routine is a signal to the child that, "Hey, it's bedtime, sleep's coming.
Mm,
This is what I gotta go do. This is my job now. I gotta go to sleep," right?
the skill, yeah.
Yep. And then you have sleep duration, which can be really, different for everybody wants to know, "Well, how much sleep should my child be getting?" You really there's a recommended number of hours per night, including day sleep as well. However, every child is different, right?
What do you
So
see typically? Like, what do you see the healthy side of that?
well, I mean, you could break it down by months, but, it's different for at
Okay,
different
age,
months. So
yeah.
it'd have to be like a whole chart of things. But, what I tell parents is, let's pay attention to mood, right? So, what's the baby like at dinner time, or what's the toddler like at dinner time? If they're cranky and fussy, it's probably time for bed. They need that bedtime to start.
Mhm.
So it can vary, but generally you're wanting about 11, 12 hours once they hit around that 1 year mark.
Of sleep?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Sounds
Can be a
nice.
little more, a little less. Sometimes
Sounds
14
good.
hours. Yeah.
Sounds good, yeah.
So it can be a little more, a little less, but mainly pay attention to your child's mood.
So what does that routine you mentioned routine. So what is give me an example of a routine, that's a good one
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
focus on.
So bedtime routines do not need to last long. In fact, if they are prolonged, you could miss your window. Okay. So for the right sleep to happen. So bedtime routine could be anything from, some parents like to give a bath at the end of the night. Not every parent likes to do that, but let's say they enjoy giving them a bath. Okay. Have your bath, put those PJs on. If it is, baby versus toddler, you can do the brush teeth, whatever. But bath, PJs, take them into their nursery. If you're reading a book, maybe read 1 or 2 books. If you're not and it's a baby, then you can, have a nursing session and then a quick, rock and then put them down. Awake, and
Put them
that's
down
the key.
awake.
When they
Oh,
when
wow,
they
okay.
are at that age of about, that 4 month mark, if they're ready to start working on sleep, you really wanna move towards putting a child awake. Drowsy, but awake so that they know that they're going in.
Mm,
Because what happens is, children develop the sleep associations. So, a sleep association is anything that's gonna help them fall asleep. So, let's say their sleep association is, drinking a bottle at bedtime. Well, they fall asleep with that bottle. You put them very stealthily in their crib, right? Because you don't wanna wake them up.
yeah.
And then in 2 hours, they kinda rouse because they've completed a sleep cycle or maybe, any number of things. "Well, where's mom? She was just here giving me a bottle," or, "She was just here nursing," or, "Dad was just here giving me a bottle." I want that. So what do? They wake up and they start crying. They need to know, "I'm going into the crib now, and it is my job to go to sleep."
And so them having their eyes open or drowsy, but
Drowsy. Yeah,
awake.
drowsy. And sometimes I suggest, when you have a really young baby and they fall asleep when they're, maybe nursing, I'll tell parents, wait and put your sleep sack on after or your swaddle, if they're in a swaddle, put it on after you nurse. And that way, just a little bit of rousing.
Oh, wow,
Doesn't have
yeah.
to be like
Yep.
fully awake, but just a little bit of eye opening to know they're going in.
And is that also when I think of, is there a phrase contact sleeping? No. What's it called?
Contact napping, maybe you're
Contact
thinking
napping?
of?
Is that where
Yeah,
they're
or
laying
contact
on you,
sleeping.
or is it
Yeah, yeah.
what's your thoughts on that, or what's the
Well, I mean, it just we want children to be sleeping well, and oftentimes that means in their sleep space, in their crib,
Mhm.
where they can kinda move around and get comfy, and, when they're contact napping I mean, look, obviously, when they're little bitty, great,
Right.
but once they're more aware of their surroundings, we really want them to do that on their own because you can't always hold a baby napping. I mean, honestly, like, you have parents who need to get things done, or you have, they have some that's a good time to get their chores done, or for mom to get her rest whenever she needs, or do things around the house or whatever. So it really, you kind of want to break through that, and they're just not getting as great a sleep.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's awesome as a new parent too, because
Yeah.
it's really cool, they're
Yeah.
falling asleep on me, but then
Right.
that leads to, I guess, the other and in that context, what about watching screens or watching shows and all that? Does that affect them at all?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I usually the blue and the white light is not great.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
what you said, yeah.
The blue and the white light is really not good. And also just that stimulation right before bed. So I usually recommend, hey, let's turn off those screens about an hour, 30 minutes max before bed
Mhm.
and just start that winding down process. Even dim the lights because all of that's going to help with their melatonin production, right? So
Okay.
if you have a big, all the lights are on and the TVs are blasting and all, it's not helping that melatonin kick in. Whereas if you dim and you quiet things down and have that time before bed as a wind down, that melatonin is going to go up and it's going to be easier for them to fall asleep.
Back to the contact side, I think about, my daughter when
Hmm.
we had her, we got in this routine of during nap, we're gonna bounce her
Hmm.
on the end of the bed.
Hmm.
And so I got very good, built up my quads, it was amazing,
Yes.
broke a few beds while we were doing it.
Yep.
But I've quickly realized that if I'd stop, she's back awake
Hmm.
and I'm in trouble.
Right.
And so I'm talking years
Yeah.
and years and years and trying to just make the noise myself, the sound.
Yeah.
And so the whole routine, my goodness, if I look back and
Mhm.
if I could have learned a few of these things then, that is obviously one we haven't really talked about. But do you see that ever, or was that just me doing
Oh
that? Or is
no.
that
And honestly, when they're little, when they're newborns, we do encourage that, right? You want to have that
soothe
sort of
them? Yeah.
swooshing and
Hmm.
it's a way to sort of soothe them when they're overstimulated because they've come out of the womb, they don't know what's going on and that sort of thing. And you can still do that as a baby. You just don't want to do it to sleep.
Well, we were doing it through middle school, so that was a little that was a little bit no, I'm just joking, but it felt like it.
Yeah,
Felt
because
like, how big
yeah,
is she her
yeah.
when her legs can touch, feet can touch the ground, we're in
Right,
trouble.
and how nice would it have been to just kind of maybe do that a little bit and then get her a little drowsy, but then, "Okay, baby, it's night-night, it's time
Yeah,
for bed.
yeah.
Love you, see you in the morning."
People traveling, especially during holidays, like you
Mhm,
and I are doing this during one of those seasons, but, is there any tips or
mhm,
advice when you are traveling or when you have a life change like that?
mhm.
What advice do you give in that?
Well, travel, you can't be 100% when you travel, and, nor do I want my clients to, give up their whole vacation just all around their child's sleep. So my advice is do the best you can with the schedule, as best as you can. Create the environment of home as best as you can. So what that looks like is, there are places that you can rent a crib, right? So let's say that you got in an Airbnb and there's no crib. Rent a crib. That's what they're sleeping in at home. Bring their bed sheet from their crib.
Their
Put
bed
their bed
sheet,
sheet
okay,
down.
yeah.
Bring their exact sound machine that they're used to. Create that same environment. Hang towels up in the windows to make it as dark as possible if there aren't blackout shades. You really want to create the same environment when you're traveling as best as you can as when you're home. And that's going to make it a little bit easier. You want to try to stick to that schedule, but if you can't, have your fun at your vacation and know that when you get back, if you have a good sleeper and you've set a good foundation before you go, might take 1 or 2 nights, you're gonna be fine, right?
Get right back up.
So, I would never suggest for anyone to start, a sleep training before a trip. I
Like right
always
before
tell
a trip?
yeah, I
Yeah.
always tell parents, if they wanna work with me, I say, "Well, are you gonna be home for at least, 3 weeks to a month to do this?" And if they're gonna go on a trip, I often say, "Let's wait until you get back, and then we'll work on it when you get back because it's just we want a good solid time to work on that sleep before they leave."
Mhm.
But yeah, creating that environment, trying to follow the schedule as best as you can, but just know that when you get back, you can repair a little bit of that sleep debt if it's been lost.
The cry it out method, is that a method? Is that something that has to happen?
No,
For
it doesn't have to
okay.
happen. There are
Okay.
lots of different methods.
Okay.
And, I work with people to find out what they feel most comfortable with. Cry it out, it's just that buzz thing and it's gotten such a bad rap, right? Because people think, oh, we're going to put a baby in and let them scream and cry for 7 hours. And that's just not true.
Mhm.
Um, there are cases where, or there are methods where, a parent can put their child into the crib, drowsy, a little bit awake, and the child begins to cry and they don't go back in. There are methods where you can, go back in and check on them and give some reassurance. Those are what we call, sort of less parental involvement methods.
Mhm.
And they work very well. They work very quickly. But then there are also other methods where if you want to be present in the room or if you want to do something a little bit differently than, listening to the crying, then we definitely have those methods as well.
Mhm.
But I will say on that note, I've done a lot of research. I've read a ton of case studies on allowing a baby some space when it's age appropriate to figure it out
Mhm.
and they're going to be mad. Look, they're overtired. They're hacked because they're used to the bouncing on the bed like you did, or they're used to the feeding to sleep. So they're angry. And what do babies do when they're angry and kids do when they're angry? They cry. That's their way of communicating. It's okay. We're not doing that for hours upon hours upon hours, right? We're just giving them some space.
Mhm.
And when we do that, they learn how to fall asleep on their
So
own.
are you when that happens, are you going back in and
You
and
can.
and
You
okay.
can. Like I said, there's different methods and some parents, will choose that where, hey, I'm gonna go back in. But I gotta be honest, that reassurance of going back in is really more for the parent than the child.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because a lot of times, you have children with temperaments where, they just get mad if you come back in. Hey, you're coming back in and you're not getting me to bounce me or feed me, or so I'm just gonna, keep screaming.
Yeah.
So what I often find is, parents, once they've started this process with that particular method, they find it's a little bit easier to stay out a little bit longer. But
Mhm. Mhm.
you can go in and reassure. And again, I call it giving them space. Just
Mhm.
give them space. We're not being, if a 3-year-old wanted candy for dinner, we wouldn't, no, you can't have candy for dinner. Or what are they going to do? Fall on the floor, probably pitch a fit. Does
Mhm.
that mean I'm going to give them candy for dinner? No, it doesn't. It's the same thing with a young child that's learning how to sleep.
Mhm.
I'm going to hold this boundary because I want you to be a healthy sleeper and we need sleep in our family. And you're going to be mad, but it's okay. I'm going to come tell you it's okay. I can check on you, So it's really the same thing if you think about it. They're,
Right.
they're going to get mad because they're frustrated. They don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And once they learn how to do it,
Then it's
it's
great.
gold.
It's great. So is that what you tell a parent? I mean, parents feel guilty about that
Yeah,
method,
I
and
see
that's hard
some
to yeah.
yeah, and a lot of times it's one of the 2 that feels a little more guilty, and so we might say if they've chosen one of the methods where they're not going in or, they might be going in to give some reassurance, but they're not sitting in the room with their child as they're falling asleep. I might say, "Hey, go on a walk." Like, "Go on a walk and, let the other one take care of it."
Mhm.
Go take a shower. You're not doing any harm. There's no harm in letting them try to figure it out.
How long have you been doing this? Like, actually working with clients now?
5 years.
Because 'Cause you're 5 years in.
Mhm.
Okay, so tell me longest amount of time that you had to work with someone and the shortest amount of time that you saw success from what you've done or what advice
Shortest
you've
amount of time was 1 night.
okay, what was that?
That was an 18-month-old who had been basically his parents had been, rocking him to sleep every single night and waking up multiple times in the night, and the mother was extremely nervous about anything. She didn't wanna hear any crying, she didn't wanna hear any protesting, I talked her through it, and we came up with a plan, we fixed the schedule, and, she decided to do the where she goes in and checks on the child. So she set a timer, and if he starts crying, they
One of
set
the
a
methods
timer.
that you
Mhm.
yep, yep.
And, go and check, give some reassurance, come back out. Um, it took he was upset, I would say maybe about 30 minutes, he was upset that night. Um, and then the second night, they sent me a text and said, "This is the first time in 18 months we have ever been able to eat dinner and watch a movie together
What?
because our
Wow.
child has been
Yeah.
asleep since 7 o'clock and we're not in there." And
Wow.
they were so grateful. And because it changes your life. When you have no sleep for that long
Yeah.
and even longer. I mean, I've worked with a 5-year-old before that never slept through the night. Parents, when they feel what it feels like to sleep again, it's like they are so grateful, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
and so because it's just been, torture to
Yeah.
not sleep.
Yeah.
The longest, it kinda depends. The sweet spot is 2 weeks that I work with someone, and the reason
Okay.
is, yeah, because at that point, they've gotten a lot of information. If we're checking in daily, I'm talking to them constantly about different things. "Hey, he did this. Okay, let's do this." So they know in the future what to do.
Mhm.
So they get a lot of that education over that 2 weeks. They get a lot of the support, and they start to feel like they're in control, and, "Hey, I got this,"
Mhm.
and they usually do. So I the longest it ever took would be any that it's ever taken with me and a client, I would say was about 2.5 weeks until they were sleeping through the night.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's
I
amazing.
mean, think about they weren't s 3 years you're not sleeping, and then it took me 2 weeks and it's
2
solved.
weeks.
And the
That's
beautiful
insane.
thing
Yeah.
about it really is, and I talk about this all the time, is, when you teach children how to sleep early on, it sets that foundation of sleep. It also helps them respect their need for sleep. And I know that sounds funny, but, a toddler will understand how important sleep is when you start that foundation early. I mean, for instance, my own child would call his number like 6 o'clock, "Mommy, it's time for bed," because he knows he's feeling tired and he knows it's time for sleep. And so he respects that because he learned it so early.
Wow.
So it's really, it really is a short period of time to focus in on something, give it your all, be consistent, follow the plan. It might be a little uncomfortable because they're going to be mad, but then you're done.
That's amazing.
And they're gonna have blips. Look, they get sick or you go on a trip or, they're going through a milestone. But if you set the foundation, it might take one night, they're back to being a great sleeper again.
Right. Right. That's gotta be an amazing thing to hear if you're watching this as a parent that's
Yes.
dealing with this right now, the idea of that,
Yes.
and that you can teach it. It's a skill that can be developed. That is amazing.
That creates health for everyone. And that's the real key is the health part of it.
Mhm. Let me ask about the timer. You mentioned that, and that was a technique that you teach.
Mhm.
Just walk through that timer technique real quick to give a picture. If someone's listening to this, they've just now heard of who you are, what you do. Can you just give us a snapshot of what that looks like, the
Sure,
timer
and
idea?
and a lot of people refer to it as the Ferber method, and that
Okay.
stands for Richard Ferber, who wrote, a book about it, so it's nothing I invented, obviously, but it works really, really well, and so what I would tell a parent is, "Let's go through your bedtime routine, you put your child in their crib, it's time for sleep, you say a couple of words to them, and then you confidently leave the room, and if that child starts to cry, you set your timer. And, it can be, I create different intervals for different parents. If I have a very sensitive parent, I might have that interval very short in the beginning. So let's say 3 minutes. So set the timer for 3 minutes. You're going to pop in. If they're still crying, everything's okay. You're fine. Go to sleep. Walk back out. And then the next time you're going to set it maybe for 5 minutes. So you're elongating that
Stretching
interval.
that time.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then you might get to where it's at 10 minutes, and then for the next every 10 minutes, you go back in, right?
Okay.
So, and those intervals are created each night, and the whole idea behind it, honestly, is just to kinda give yourself some time before you go back in to do any kind of checking because they could be close to falling asleep, and you wanna give them that time
I
to
gotcha.
figure out how to do
So
it.
that structure, it gives you something that you can
Correct.
kinda go by yourself to do
Yeah,
that.
and if you're listening and your child let's say your child was really mad in the beginning, but now they're just kind of like, maybe they're just kinda like, trying like moaning or humming.
Mhm.
Well, that could be a self-soothing mechanism, so the last thing you wanna do is pop in there. So I'll tell parents, if they're doing that, hold off for a minute
Mhm.
and let's give them a chance to do this.
Mhm.
Because if you pop in when they're almost asleep, they wake back
I
up.
guess the monitor is helpful too. If you're sitting there,
It
it's where
is,
you
yeah,
are. I mean,
listening to the monitor,
do you watch it? I mean, you got a
you
video
can,
monitor.
you can, you don't
Yeah.
have to, but,
Yeah.
a lot of parents now like the video aspect of it, but yeah, you're just really just listening
Hmm.
to what they're doing, and if it kinda gets a little less, you don't wanna pop in there and disrupt them.
Yeah. Are you seeing a difference in a new generation of parents now compared to what you studied and what you learned along the way, or is it pretty much still the same?
It hasn't been that long since I left school. Where I see the big difference is, in my parents' generation versus, my generation and this younger generation.
Mhm.
There's a lot of, differences in the way that they did it versus us. For instance, they said, "Never wake a sleeping baby." Well, we don't wanna wake a sleeping baby, but sometimes we have to wake a baby because we don't want them to sleep too late to where they're not gonna have their good bedtime sleep,
Mm,
because remember that bedtime is crucial, getting that early sleep at night. So sometimes you do have to wake them. So there's, quite a few differences between those generations. The younger generation than me, I think they're just, there's so much out there now, they're just
yeah.
getting hit from all different direction. Again, that sometimes it's helpful, but sometimes it's not.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just need to hone in on an individual plan too,
Yeah.
because you can read a book, but that's not meant for the Smith family. Well, I'm working with the Smith family and I know what they need, and I've
Mhm.
talked to them extensively about their goals, and I can create the plan for them
Mhm.
specifically.
Mhm. And your training itself, the way you've structured that, is gonna be teaching, I would say, a healthy chunk of what people can use without ever picking up the phone and calling you, theoretically, is the
Absolutely.
way you're doing that, because there's
Absolutely.
only so much time you have by
That's
the time
right.
it's
Yeah,
time it's done.
absolutely.
But that's why we see also workshops. I mean, I
Yep.
think you in an environment where you have a bunch of parents that are in there, and new parents or ones that are dealing with this, to
Mhm.
go through it, because those stories, the similar stories, feed each other as
Yes.
well.
And there's universal to it. There
Mm.
are definitely universal pillars to this, all
Yes,
of this.
yes. Yep.
So yeah, if you can't hire a consultant, then any kind of workshop that I might provide, that you're going to get really good meat and information
Mhm.
based on that science of sleep that I've studied, and what I know has worked with my clients.
Well, we're super excited to have you here and to be doing this. Where, if people wanted to find you right now, are
Mhm.
you on social? Do you have a website?
Yeah,
What would
so
they
I'm
do?
on Instagram, Facebook. Rest Sleep Rise is the name of my
Sleep
business.
Rise. Okay.
Rest Sleep Rise. Yep.
restsleeprise.com.
Yep,
Okay.
.com, and that's my website, and then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and they can find me there, and, yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Well, we're looking forward to having you come back
yeah,
and doing more with you. And I'm sure we're going to be getting questions of like, what about this? And what about that? But it's been a pleasure having you. And I'm
thanks.
glad you came in.
Love it.
All right. Bye.